Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is really laser-focused on one of the most powerful, yet intensely scrutinized entities in American healthcare, DaVita Inc.
That's right.
This company specializes in a single life-or-death service kidney dialysis, and its business model, well, it provides a perfect, high-stakes illustration of how healthcare, massive corporate finance, and government subsidies all intersect.
It's a deep dive into what is really critical infrastructure. We are analyzing a stack of sources here detailing DaVita's extraordinary scale, its unique financial dependence on a highly specific mix of government and commercial payers, and a decades-long trail of high-stakes legal battles, settlements, and regulatory scrutiny.
And the stakes here are just. They're
Right.
profound, they're personal, and they are non-negotiable. We're talking about end-stage renal disease, or ESRD.
Right.
If you or someone you know faces this diagnosis, the treatment kidney dialysis is mandatory. It is not optional care you can postpone or shop around for leisurely.
No, absolutely not.
Patients require this life-sustaining intervention, usually 3 times a week, for the rest of their lives, unless they receive a transplant. DaVita is one of the dominant forces delivering this care across the country.
And that necessity, that absolute medical need, creates a unique market dynamic. When your survival literally depends on a service, the providers of that service hold incredible financial and political leverage.
So our discussion today is essentially about how DaVita maximized that leverage within a system where the government is the primary insurer, but not the primary source of profit.
That is the core contradiction.
The first hook that captures this tension perfectly is the juxtaposition of their corporate standing against their legal woes. We are examining a company that hit, US $12.8 billion in revenue in 2024,
An incredible number.
and it's recognized as a component of the S&P 500, meaning it's one of the 500 largest, most robust public traded companies in the U.S.
A blue chip company by any definition.
And yet, this blue-chip giant is currently facing multiple federal investigations and a major class action lawsuit alleging market manipulation.
That is the core contradiction we need to dissect for you. You have the stability and essential service delivery on one side, and then on the other, you have this pattern of aggressive financial maneuvering and, well, significant legal risk.
To really understand the complexity, we have to start with the sheer physical and financial scale of DaVita. Until you map out their footprint, it's almost impossible to appreciate how fundamentally entwined they are with the U.S. healthcare system.
Let's define that footprint first. The company is strategically incorporated in Delaware, which is very common for large U.S. corporations for legal and tax reasons, but their operational headquarters are in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, so that's the corporate structure. Now let's look at the U.S. market dominance, because our sources paint a very clear picture of concentration. DaVita operates 2,675 outpatient centers across the country.
And that is a massive network.
It is. And this extensive network serves 200 to 1,800 patients.
That 2,675 number is, frankly, staggering. And here's why you should care about that number. It indicates the accessibility of their services. Dialysis is administered 3 times a week.
Right, you can't travel far for it.
You can't. Patients must have a clinic near them. So by owning this many centers, DaVita is effectively a local monopoly or duopoly in thousands of communities across America.
And what does that mean for the overall market when you
Yes.
have that kind of local concentration?
It means that DaVita holds a significant 37% market share in the U.S. dialysis market. This is where the structural issue of the entire dialysis industry comes into sharp focus.
So it's not just DaVita.
No. With DaVita holding 37% and its main competitor, Fresenius Medical Care, holding a similar share, you have a highly consolidated duopoly dominating a non-elective life-sustaining service.
Wow. So roughly 3/4 of all U.S. dialysis patients are served by just 2 companies.
Exactly, too.
When we talk about monopolies or duopolies in other sectors, like tech or logistics, consumers can eventually switch or new services can be innovated. There's some kind of market pressure.
Right, there's an escape valve.
But in critical mandatory medical care, that level of concentration, it significantly limits patient choice, which, as we'll see later, provides enormous leverage for these companies.
Absolutely. And while the U.S. is their heartland, their core business, they aren't purely a domestic player. Their international reach, while it's smaller in terms of revenue contribution, is still pretty substantial.
So what does that global presence look like?
Well, DaVita operates 367 outpatient centers in 11 other countries, serving an additional 49,400 patients globally. This international footprint demonstrates their operational reach and, It allows the company to leverage efficiency and best practices across different regulatory environments.
But the main event is the U.S.
Oh, for sure. Their core regulatory and financial challenges remain rooted right here in the U.S. system.
Let's pivot to the corporate identity then, and the hard financial numbers from 2024. We already mentioned the U.S. $12.8 billion in revenue. That level of revenue dedicated to treating one single chronic condition is just immense.
It is. And when you look at the profitability metrics, you see exactly why this company is considered an institutional powerhouse. The 2024 financial snapshot, it reveals some serious operational efficiency. Their operating income stood at US $2.09 billion, and the net income was US $1.25 billion.
And for listeners who may be curious about the difference there between operating income and net income, operating income tells you how much money the core business makes before taxes and interest. It reflects their pure operational performance.
So how efficient they are at running those thousands of dialysis centers.
Exactly. And net income is the bottom line, what's left for the shareholders after all expenses, taxes, and interest are paid. The fact that they retain over $1 billion in net income speaks to incredible discipline.
And that operational discipline is absolutely necessary because, structurally, DaVita is a capital-intensive organization. Their total assets are valued at US $17.3 billion.
$17 billion.
That figure underscores the enormous fixed cost base required to run this whole operation. You have to own or lease thousands of clinics. You have to purchase and maintain millions of dollars worth of specialized dialysis equipment.
And these are not simple machines.
No, these are complex, expensive medical devices, and you have to manage extensive supply chains for dialysate and pharmaceuticals. It's a huge logistical challenge.
That fixed cost base means they need volume, and they need reliable, high-margin revenue just to cover that massive overhead, which brings us to the human scale of it all. They employed 76,000 people in 2024.
Which cements their status as a major U.S. employer.
And it earned them the 341st spot on the Fortune 500 list.
And look, when you hit the Fortune 500, you are a critical part of the U.S. economy. This leads us directly to the major stakeholders, the institutional investors who rely on this company's stability and predictability.
And here's where it gets really interesting for anyone following high finance. The massive shadow of Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett's investment vehicle is listed as a major owner.
The inclusion of Berkshire Hathaway is, in many ways, the ultimate validation of DaVita's business model. Buffett generally seeks stable, predictable, long-term, profitable businesses, and the non-cyclical, mandatory nature of dialysis care fits that criteria perfectly. People don't stop needing dialysis in a recession.
We found a fascinating little discrepancy in our source material regarding that ownership stake, which is worth discussing because it illustrates the complexity of dealing with public corporate data.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Our source lists two slightly different figures for Berkshire Hathaway's stake, 41.2% in the general information box, but then 32% in the detailed list of public company ownership positions.
And that difference, it could stem from several factors. It could be a difference in reporting dates. It could be whether certain convertible shares are included in one figure but not the other, or just how different regulatory bodies categorize ownership.
But the key takeaway for you, listening, is not the exact percentage.
No, the point is the profound significance. I mean, even at the lower figure of 32%, a single entity, Berkshire Hathaway, controls nearly a third of this multi-billion-dollar life-sustaining healthcare provider.
It's a huge stamp of confidence placed on a company whose stability, as we are about to see, hinges entirely on its ability to navigate the complex and sometimes fraught financial gap between what the government pays and what commercial insurers pay.
And that duality right there defines everything DaVita is.
If Section 1 was about who DaVita is, this section is about how DaVita makes its money. And this is the absolute financial core of this entire deep dive. If you understand the mechanics of the mix, you understand the company's incentives, its strategies, and its history of legal troubles.
This is the critical insight we really need to drive home for you. Kidney dialysis is unlike many other medical procedures because of a specific federal rule.
What's the rule?
Medicare covers nearly all individuals with end-stage renal disease, regardless of their age, typically after a short waiting period. This guarantees that most patients requiring dialysis will have government coverage.
Okay, so the government is basically the default payer for this condition. Let's put some numbers to that. Our sources show for 2023, a staggering 89% of DaVita's patients were covered by government-based health insurance programs.
So that's primarily Medicare, but also some Medicaid.
9 out of every 10 patients served by DaVita are relying on the federal government to pay the bill.
That 89% represents volume and stability. It's predictable revenue. It ensures that the lights stay on and the expensive fixed costs we just discussed are generally covered. However,
There's always a however.
there is. When we look at the revenue contribution breakdown for that same year, the picture dramatically flips and it reveals the real profit driver.
Okay, let's see that flip. So, while 89% of patients were government covered, those programs only accounted for 67% of the company's total revenue.
Which means the remaining 11% of patients, just that small slice covered by commercial or private insurance, were generating the remaining 33% of the company's total revenue.
Wow, that is a massive disproportion.
It's huge.
So we have a small fraction of the patient population generating 1/3 of the total revenue. But here's the most important sentence in this entire analysis, and this is according to our source material.
Yeah.
Those commercial payers, which accounted for that remaining 33% of revenues in 2023, generate nearly all of the company's profit.
That is the engine. The volume, that 89% government segment, it covers the overhead and provides the scale necessary for efficiency. But the profit, the money that funds acquisitions, stock buybacks, and shareholder returns, which includes that enormous Berkshire Hathaway stake, comes almost entirely from that high-margin commercial side.
We absolutely need to spend time on the why. Why are commercial payers reimbursing DaVita at such an astronomical, disproportionate rate compared to Medicare?
The why comes down to a simple concept:
Yeah.
fixed rates versus negotiation leverage. Government payments from Medicare and Medicaid are set through fixed, often bundled rates determined by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS. These rates are intentionally set low to control federal spending, and DaVita has to accept them.
Because of that mandatory Medicare coverage rule. They have no choice.
Right. They are, on the government side, a price taker.
A price taker. Yeah.
Precisely. But on the commercial side, DaVita is a price maker.
How so?
Commercial payers reimburse DaVita at a much higher rate because, remember, DaVita and Fresenius control the market. It's that duopoly we talked about. Since dialysis care is mandatory, an insurer can't just tell its members, oh, sorry, we won't cover treatment at the nearest DaVita center.
They have a riot on their hands.
They would. They must include the provider in their network. And DaVita uses its massive footprint to negotiate extremely high rates, sometimes hundreds of % higher than the Medicare rate for the exact same service, in the exact same chair, with the exact same technician.
So this high commercial rate isn't just padding, it's structural to their entire business. If DaVita lost its high-margin commercial business, the company would likely cease to be profitable, regardless of the steady stream of government patients.
Absolutely. It creates an existential imperative for the company to attract and retain commercially insured patients.
It explains every strategic move we're about to discuss. It explains the imperative for ruthless efficiency to squeeze every penny out of the government side.
And crucially, it explains the legal history. As you'll see, any alleged fraud or kickback scheme can often be traced back to the drive to capture, retain, or maximize payments from that highly valuable, high-margin commercial slice of the pie.
So the goal is volume, yes, but the profit driver is optimizing the payer mix, getting those commercially insured patients onto the dialysis chairs at DaVita centers.
That insight is essential to carry forward. It's the key to the whole story.
And that financial structure didn't just appear overnight. It's the result of decades of massive corporate pivots, high-risk financial engineering, and near-catastrophic failures. Let's trace how this U.S. $12.8 billion entity got here, starting with its inception.
The company was established relatively far back in 1979. Initially, it was called Medical Ambulatory Care, Inc. And crucially, it was born as a subsidiary of a much larger parent company, National Medical Enterprises, Inc.
Which later evolved into Tenet Healthcare, as you mentioned earlier.
Right. So this gave it established resources and roots from day one. It wasn't just a startup.
But the first major financial shockwave came in 1994. And it wasn't through organic growth, but through high-stakes financial maneuvering. The leveraged buyout, or LBO.
In August 1994, 70% of the company was acquired by DLJ Merchant Banking Partners. An LBO is essentially buying a company primarily using debt, expecting the company's future cash flow to pay off that debt. It's a high-risk, high-reward move.
And the total value of the deal was $75.5 million. But what was DLJ's actual skin in the game?
That's the amazing part. Their initial equity investment was surprisingly small, just $10.5 million. They were betting big on the company's future, using mostly borrowed money. And following the LBO, they renamed it Total Renal Care Holdings, Inc.
The clock immediately started ticking for the investors. I mean, LBO firms typically look for a quick exit to monetize their investment, and Total Renal Care wasted no time.
Exactly. They turned it into a public company just over a year later. The initial public offering, the IPO, happened in October 1995 and successfully raised $107 million. This infusion of cash allowed the company to pay down some of that LBO debt and provided the investors their first real opportunity to cash out.
And the investor payoff for DLJ was just spectacular. By December 1996, our sources show that DLJ had made a stunning 386% return on its initial $10.5 million investment.
Just think about what that means. You're turning $10.5 million into over $40 million in just 2 years.
That level of rapid, high-margin financial success in the healthcare space sets an extremely aggressive precedent for future leadership. It builds an expectation.
It creates a culture of expectation for exponential growth. And often, that expectation drives leaders to make really aggressive moves that can lead to instability, which is precisely what happened in the late 1990s.
They ran straight into a massive corporate crisis following an acquisition headache. In February 1998, they acquired a major rival, Renal Treatment Centers, for $1.3 billion in stock.
This was supposed to be a market-defining merger, the big move to consolidate power.
Instead, it turned into what you could call corporate indigestion. The sources are very clear. The integration of this massive acquisition went poorly.
And look, combining two large, geographically dispersed healthcare providers is always difficult. You're trying to harmonize IT systems, clinical protocols, corporate cultures. It's a nightmare.
And this failure led directly to chaos at the top, resulting in the simultaneous resignation of the CEO and the CFO in July 1999.
That's a huge red flag for the market.
The market reacted immediately and harshly. The stock, which had tripled in value between the 1995 IPO and 1998, just collapsed. By July 1999, it had dropped 71% year-to-date.
This was a near-death experience, a full-blown financial crisis for the organization then known as Total Renal Care. They were on the brink.
So, to stabilize the failing company, the board brought in new leadership. Kent J. Thury, who was 43 at the time, was named CEO in October 1999. His initial task wasn't growth, it was survival and radical internal overhaul.
He had to stop the bleeding.
This turnaround effort culminated in the company's symbolic rebirth. In 2000, they shed the ballast of the failing acquisition integration, they sold off their non-U.S. operations to focus, and they renamed the company DaVita Inc.
And the rebranding itself was strategic and, frankly, brilliant. The name DaVita is derived from the Italian phrase derived, which means to give life.
It was a very conscious effort to move past the financial failures and the stock collapse associated with the Total Renal Care name, and recenter the company's identity around its noble, life-sustaining mission.
A fresh start.
Following that stabilization, the next decade saw a return to that aggressive growth by acquisition strategy. The focus was on market share dominance, which made them the giant they are today.
The first major post-rebirth acquisition was Gambro Healthcare in October 2005. That was a crucial move to solidify their U.S. market position against Fresenius, but they weren't done trying to expand their scope.
Then came what we've termed the medical group experiment. In 2012, DaVita acquired healthcare partners for a massive $4.42 billion.
$4.4 billion.
They later rebranded this entire division as DaVita Medical Group in 2016, and the strategic goal was clear. By owning primary care, specialty care, and urgent care groups, they could potentially control the referral streams of ESRD patients directly to their high-margin dialysis centers.
It was an attempt at vertical integration, controlling the patient journey from the moment of diagnosis all the way to treatment. But managing massive decentralized physician practices is a whole different ballgame from running efficient, standardized dialysis centers. And the experiment, well, it didn't last.
By 2019, they performed a major strategic pivot, selling the entire DaVita Medical Group division to United Health Group's Optum division for $4.3 billion.
And what's so fascinating here is the financial outcome. They walked away from this multi-billion-dollar strategic pivot, and they essentially recouped the entire initial investment.
They basically got their money back.
They did. It demonstrates incredible financial savvy in their exit strategy. They realized the core business was dialysis. They jettisoned the distraction without a significant loss, and they immediately refocused resources on their core profit drivers.
And that focus led to a steady stream of smaller, more strategic acquisitions that demonstrated a consistent expansion strategy in specific high-growth or high-value regions.
We see clear examples of this focused regional strategy. In 2014, they acquired Colorado Springs Health Partners, integrating 600 employees and 110,000 patients into their ecosystem.
And then in 2016.
In 2016, they picked up the Everett Clinic Medical Group, a huge practice in the Seattle area, with 20 sites and 315,000 patients for $385 million. And then again in 2017, they acquired Well Health Quality Care.
So these regional expansions, they highlight a strategy of buying up the local competition and, more importantly, key referral sources. It's this decades-long, persistent drive for market consolidation that leads us directly to the enormous price the company has paid in legal settlements and regulatory actions.
The growth had consequences. If Section 2 explained the motive, that relentless chase for the high-margin commercial patient, this section illustrates the consequences. The history of DaVita is marked by a clear and expensive pattern of settling very serious allegations of fraud and misconduct, underscoring the high-stakes environment of subsidized healthcare.
Let's start with one of the biggest initial hits. The illegal kickbacks case in 2014. DaVita agreed to pay a massive $350 million settlement.
So to connect this back to the core business model we talked about, why would a dialysis provider pay kickbacks?
For the patients.
For the right patients. Because the commercially insured patients are the ones who generate all the profit. The allegation was that DaVita provided illegal financial incentives to doctors to ensure those highly valuable patient referrals were directed specifically to DaVita's centers, keeping them out of the hands of competitors.
So a $350 million penalty is really just the cost of doing business when you are aggressively protecting that critical 11% of your payer mix.
You could certainly see it that way.
The very next year, 2015, brought an even larger settlement concerning drug waste and billing fraud. DaVita agreed to pay $450 million for this one.
This case highlighted systemic fraud aimed specifically at the government system, at Medicare. The allegation involved seeking reimbursement from the U.S. federal government for drugs that were unnecessarily disposed of.
How does that work?
Well, many drugs used in dialysis, like those for anemia, come in multi-dose vials. So if a doctor uses only a fraction of the drug from a vial on one patient, the remaining drug often has to be discarded for safety reasons. DaVita was accused of billing Medicare for the entire vial multiple times. So they'd use a little on one patient, bill for the whole thing, use a little more on another patient, bill for the whole thing again. They were maximizing payment by essentially turning necessary waste into a systematic revenue stream. A $450 million settlement indicates this practice was probably widespread and long-standing.
Here's where the focus shifts from financial fraud to patient safety, bringing the human stakes back into sharp focus. In 2018, DaVita faced devastating wrongful death claims, and this resulted in a jury awarding $383 million to the families of 3 patients.
This case centered on the ultimate failure of care quality. The patients tragically died from cardiac arrest after receiving treatment at DaVita centers. And while the legal specifics are complex, the verdict suggests that cost-cutting measures or operational lapses.
Driven by that intense need for efficiency we talked about.
Exactly. Driven by the need to make the low-margin government segment work. May have had catastrophic consequences for patient safety. This massive award is a stark reminder that in healthcare, efficiency cannot come at the expense of quality.
Also in 2018, we saw another major False Claims Act violation. This one focused on inflated payments, settled for $270 million. And this one touches on a specific mechanism of fraud related to Medicare Advantage plans.
This is a complex but really crucial area known as risk adjustment coding or upcoding.
Explain that.
So Medicare Advantage plans are run by private insurers, but they're funded by the government. And they receive higher federal payments for patients who are deemed sicker or more complex, those with higher risk scores. The allegation was that DaVita provided inaccurate information, essentially exaggerating the severity or complexity of patients' conditions.
Which made the patients look sicker on paper than they were.
Right. And this caused the Medicare Advantage plans to receive inflated payments from the government, which in turn allowed DaVita to charge those plans higher rates. It's a roundabout way to get more money from this system.
The $270 million settlement proves the government views these inflated coding practices as a clear violation of the False Claims Act. And there's a specific fascinating detail here that illustrates the power of federal law.
The whistleblower.
Exactly. The whistleblower, a man named James Swobin, who brought the initial action, received a bounty of $10 million for exposing the scheme.
That payout shows the scale and value of the information he provided to the government. It's a huge incentive for insiders to come forward.
Moving into the 2020s, the legal scrutiny shifted a bit. from billing Medicare to labor market practices and antitrust concerns, reflecting DaVita's increasing market power.
In July 2021, a federal grand jury indicted DaVita and former CEO Kent Thury.
The same CEO who had led the company's rebirth after the crisis.
It's the very same one. They were indicted on charges of labor market collusion.
What was the allegation there?
The allegation was that DaVita engaged in no-poach agreements, so conspiracies with a competitor, surgical care affiliates, to suppress competition for the services of certain senior-level employees.
So they agreed not to hire each other's executives.
Essentially, yes. And these kinds of conspiracies stifle wage growth and employee mobility. While it's not related to patient fraud, it shows regulatory bodies are scrutinizing every lever DaVita pulls to maintain profitability and control costs, including those related to its 76,000 employees.
There's a major win for the company here, though. This one didn't end in a settlement.
That's right. Despite the federal indictment, both the company and Thury were acquitted by a jury in April 2022. This really demonstrates the challenge the government faces, improving these complex, white-collar, anti-collusion cases beyond a reasonable doubt, even with extensive evidence.
But the regulatory pressure from the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, it didn't let up. They focused squarely on DaVita's long-term strategy of aggressive regional consolidation.
Right. In 2021, the FTC imposed strict limits on the company engaging in future mergers, specifically in the state of Utah.
Why Utah?
This was a direct regulatory response to the strategy we saw laid out in Section 3, buying up local and regional competitors. The FTC determined that DaVita had become too dominant in the Utah market through these acquisitions, effectively stifling competition and giving them undue pricing power. The FTC is now actively regulating DaVita's ability to grow through acquisitions in regions where its market share is already just too high.
And this leads us to the present moment, marked by a massive intensification of scrutiny focused on the duopoly structure itself.
In 2024, the FTC began investigating DaVita, along with its rival, Fresenius Medical Care. The allegation is that the two companies are using illegal tactics to push smaller dialysis companies out of the market. This probe is critical because it challenges the very structural foundation of the U.S. dialysis industry.
And finally, the most recent development from May 2025 ties all of this legal history, the collusion, the duopoly, and the profit imperative, into a single massive proposed class action lawsuit.
This lawsuit was filed by the Benefits Fund of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 1776, and it targets both DaVita and Fresenius. The core allegation is simple. The two dominant companies illegally conspired to inflate treatment costs for dialysis patients by billions of dollars.
So if that allegation is proven, it confirms a direct link we established back in Section 2.
It does.
That small percentage of commercial revenue is critical for profit. If the two market leaders colluded to keep those commercial reimbursement rates artificially high, then the multi-billion-dollar cost of that high-margin profit slice is ultimately borne by private payers, by benefits funds, and indirectly by the employers and union members who fund them.
When you total up just the key settlements and verdicts we've covered, $350 million, $450 million, $383 million, $283 million, you are looking at well over $1.4 billion paid out in recent years alone.
Over $1 billion.
That figure, combined with the ongoing antitrust scrutiny, paints a clear picture of a company whose necessary life-saving service is constantly intertwined with major financial and legal risk.
So what does this all mean? Our deep dive into DaVita Inc. has truly synthesized the critical tension at the heart of essential American healthcare.
It really has. On one side, you have a massive, highly efficient S&P 500 company providing a non-negotiable, life-sustaining medical treatment kidney dialysis to over 200,000 people. This is indispensable service delivery.
You can't argue with that. It's necessary. But on the other side, you have a financial model reliant on leveraging the vast disparity between low, fixed government payments and astronomically high negotiated commercial payments.
And that pursuit of disproportionate profit has repeatedly fueled aggressive strategies, resulting in billions in settlements for issues ranging from illegal kickbacks and inflated billing to devastating wrongful death claims.
The history we traced, the LBO, the collapse, the rebirth as DaVita, the massive acquisitions, and the successful divestitures, it all shows a corporate entity that is relentlessly optimizing itself to extract maximum value from a fixed-demand, subsidized market.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the present, focusing on that 2025 class action lawsuit and the ongoing FTC probe into the duopoly shared with Fresenius. These actions directly target the alleged conspiracy to inflate those high-margin commercial rates.
This raises an important question for you, the person listening, trying to be well-informed. When two dominant companies, with DaVita alone holding 37% of the U.S. market, are repeatedly accused of financial misconduct and are under investigation for allegedly conspiring to inflate costs for mandatory life-saving care.
What does that suggest about the true function and future accessibility of critical medical services in the United States?
When the structure of the market ensures that profit comes not from serving the majority of patients covered by the government, but from maximizing the yield from the few covered by private money, well, that tension creates a perpetual regulatory environment.
And it forces us to consider whether the concentration of essential care in the hands of these hyper-profitable corporate entities can ever be fully divorced from financial strategies that push the legal and ethical boundaries.
It's a complex and high-stakes system, and understanding the financial dynamics is really the key to understanding the headlines. Something for you to mull over the next time you hear about healthcare regulation or private insurance premiums.
A deep dive into the business of giving life.
And the cost of profit. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.